this case would have you believe. There's a long history in this country of demonizing the new methods of entertainment that each generation adopts. Take, for example, the case of pinball. The game as we know it was popularized in the 1940s and was almost immediately seized upon by those in power as evidence of cultural degeneracy. We view it as quaint now, but then in many cities it was banned because the elements of chance were viewed to be gambling, and it therefore was offensive to the tastes of society. Some cities even instituted age limits and would set, the number of feet that minors would have to keep between themselves and a pinball machine. These bans weren't removed until the 1970s, and for these 30 years, pinball came to be viewed as the hallmark of rebellious youth who managed to find ways to play it even as traditional society decried the terrible effects that it must be having on their psyches. Incidentally, this generation bred the fine men and women who now make up our Supreme Court. One might ask the justices if any one of them has ever played a pinball game.
Yeah.
Now, what about these assertions that video games cause people to become hostile and violent? I personally examined the briefs filed in support of Schwarzenegger's ban on selling video games to minors, and I found that not one of them has cited a study that implies anything more than a simple correlation between violent tendencies and video games. Now, far from being damning evidence, this correlation is to be expected. People with violent tendencies, it's natural for them to seek out healthy outlets for these urges. The violence present in video games can fulfill this need just as well as can the inherent brutality in the all-American sport of football, which we applaud when youth participate in. Now, some would say that these negative effects of video games can only be observed in young people specifically. Look at the Columbine shooting, they say. That crime was caused by the exposure of its perpetrators to the game Doom. Now, it's true that one of the Columbine shooters did say that his crime would resemble Doom. He also said in the same sentence that it would resemble the atrocities of the Vietnam War. What in this implicates video games? The Columbine tragedy was not caused by the exposure of teenagers to video games. It was caused by the exposure of two mentally unstable individuals to a society that they hated. To take their actions as representative of all teenagers is no more justified than to take the actions of the 9/11 hijackers as representative of all Muslims. Both of these are rational fallacies, and both of them, if not cut off at their roots, have the power to destroy our democratic society and leave in its place one of fear and discrimination. It's important to note as well in this case that this is not a matter of protecting small children. No toddler is going to accidentally make his way to a video game store with $50 in his pocket and ask to purchase the latest Halo. This law only affects those minors with the maturity and independence to make their way to a video game store and purchase the game of their choice. The underlying philosophy of this law is that there is something inherent, some trait inherent to these people who are mature and independent and under the age of 18 that causes them to sustain severe psychological damage from playing video games. And this is an assertion that the science simply does not support. Now, closest to my heart is the manner in which this case is being decided. The Supreme Court justices are appointed through presidential nomination and and Senate confirmation. Most Americans are represented in this process by virtue of having voted in the presidential and the Senate elections. Today is election day, and on this day, millions of people across this country are exercising their right, as I speak, to defend their interests through the casting of a ballot. Not one of these millions of people is under the age of 18. Not one of these ballots is representing clearly the interests of youth. On this day, if any one of these 75 million people who are under the age of 18 should think of raising their voice to speak, to vote, they will find that their tongues have been cut out and held in trust. If I could vote, I would vote against these people who would stray so far from the founding principles of our nation as to engage in needless censorship. I would vote against those who would abandon reasoned action to chase a fleeting moral panic. I would vote against those who lack the vision to see that this California law is an attack on youth. And with that, one more wall is built between people, and with that, so much human effort will be wasted in the fruitless endeavors of control and resentment. But I can't vote. And so I'm here today to speak in the manner with which I am permitted, and to beg you, you who can vote, to remember when you leave here that free speech is a right, a human right, and that human rights can have no age limits. Thank you.
All right.
Jeff Foreman, I'm reporting with Consumer Electronics.
Hi.